CLS Talks.
Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me.
Real information.
Talk to me.
Real education.
Talk to me. Talk to me. They don't talk to me. They look like they want it. They don't talk to me. They want it. They don't talk to me. They want it. They don't talk to me. They want it. CLS.
Welcome back to the CLS Talks. I'm Lionel Coveney and I'm joined by Des Carty, and we're continuing our tale of the Gary Doyle Order. Are we here to follow the orders of someone else and to do somebody else's bidding, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, merely for a paycheck?
Well, that's up to the individual to decide, isn't it? As a free people, as a free man or woman, that's for you to decide, isn't it?
Well, I would have thought so. My interpretation of what they were possibly trying to do there, or the category they were trying to put Tom into, is the free man on the land movement, or to try and put him within some kind of grouping, because I think there has been a huge media bastardisation of the term free man. So yourself and myself understand it as being a man or woman who is free, but I think when we hear the media using the term free man, and we've seen this time and time again over the years, it's almost like the same category that the term conspiracy theorist has been thrown into. It's something bad, it's something dirty, it's something lunatic, fringe, and whatever adjective you want to throw at it, but it's not a good thing, and it's not something that loyal citizens, are they free men, should be aspiring to. Correct. And I think that's maybe what they were trying to establish, because I think if Tom had answered, oh yeah, I'm a free man on the land or whatever, it would have been, okay, we've got a lunatic here in the back. Yeah, we've got one of those and we'll treat him accordingly. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next couple of episodes how indeed he was treated, because he didn't answer that question. And I wonder how frustrating it might be for them to be met as an answer to their questions with another question in turn, which I think is a very good strategy, by the way, on the part of Tom. Absolutely.
Again, it's a strategy anybody can employ. Okay, so we're now, I suppose, in the position where he's in Portlaoise Garda station, and they process him, so to speak, and they put him in a room with the glass surrounding him, and he's put in front of a member in charge. This is Tom, obviously.
And for those who mightn't be familiar with, and hopefully most of us aren't familiar with, the processing in a Garda station, what's involved there? Is it a quick process? Does it take a bit of time? Does Tom have to answer a load of questions, or does he have to do anything?
Well, from Tom's recollection of the events and his description of the events, what they did with him, maybe he was a special case, we don't know, but they took him into a room. They took the handcuffs off him, but he was in a locked room with two glass fronts on it. And they took the handcuffs off. Then they searched him, took out any property he had on him, be it coins, change, phones, whatever, and they gave them over to the member in charge. The member in charge put them in an envelope, apparently. Then the member in charge proceeded then, with the glass between them, to ask Tom questions like, what's your name, what's your date of birth, what's your address, what's this, what's that, what's the other. Now Tom put back to the member in charge, I think the member in charge was called Garda Cooper. He put back questions to Tom, or to the Garda Cooper. Why was he here? Why did he want the name? Why did he want Tom's name? Why did he want the address? Why did he want to know about his health? Why? So every time the Garda Cooper asked questions, Tom put it back to him. Why do you want to know this information?
And that seems perfectly reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Like, some people might perceive that as being, I don't know, trying to annoy the guards or piss them off or whatever, but it's perfectly reasonable. If you've been taken off the side of the road,
kidnapped,
there you go, and put in a room, had your belongings stolen from you, surely you have a right, and we know, because we've looked at the articles relating to that, you have a right to know exactly what's going on and why it's going on.
Equally then, as Garda Cooper persisted with questions, Tom did ask that he be given an interview, a recorded interview, with either Garda Cooper or somebody else, superintendent or the sergeant in charge, and they refused to do that. But that's not on the record here, that's not on the charge sheet, that's not recorded on the charge sheet. And he also, Tom was looking to make a phone call to legal counsel and to friends and family to let them know where he was and what was going on, and they refused to do that unless the guards were allowed, unless the call was going to be made on the Garda phone. So that meant that Tom knew in his head, if I make a phone call, they will record it, and that may be used as evidence against me also. So this is one thing that was, which was probably good about the whole thing. Tom realised that anything he said to the guards would, in effect, be used against him, and that's something we should all remember.
That's very interesting, because we're all familiar with that term from TV and movies and whatnot, but it's very, very important, because so many cases are decided on the side of the road when people give evidence against themselves without realising that's what they're doing. So can you kind of give us a little bit more insight, Des, into how that can be important, how that can happen, and why people need to be mindful of it every step of the way? Okay. Because, for example, people can think that they're doing themselves a favour by answering certain questions, but they might actually be doing the opposite. Okay.
By law, you do not have to give your name or details to anybody anyway. I mean, the guards are strangers if they stop you on the side of the road. So, in the first instance, you should want to know why they're stopping you, what they want. Now, if it's an emergency, I'm sure if there was an emergency, everybody here would say, okay, fair enough, it's an emergency, there's a crash ahead or there's a problem ahead. And that's the only way the guards can stop you on the road, if there's an emergency. And that's in law. We mentioned that probably in the first or second episode of this, that we wanted people to look up what the rights of the guards are in relation to be able to making stops on the road. But again, just to give it a bit more meat to that, people can look this up for themselves. The guards only have powers to divert traffic or stop traffic when it's an emergency of some form or another, when there's a crowd gathering, maybe it's a concert, but only for safety purposes, not for the purpose of generating revenue in terms of tax or insurance or any other fines or fees or anything like that. So back to the station. When you're asked questions, and it was important at the time that Tom at least kept that much in his head, that anything he said would be used, will and would be used against him in evidence in court if necessary. So Tom wanted to know why they wanted his name per se. They wouldn't tell him. Tom wanted to know what the charge was. They wouldn't tell him. Now, the fact that they wouldn't tell him what the charge was, Tom knew, well, if they had a charge, why aren't they telling me?
Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they tell you? Like, if they think you committed a crime, why wouldn't they say, well, we think you committed this crime, where this is what we're going to charge you with? So, in retrospect then, looking at the charge sheet that Tom got as evidence eventually, it had none of the information that they wanted from him, because they would have said, well, this is such and such, this is Tom from such and such an address, we know now where to send everything and where to get him. Okay, so by giving that private information, you're actually saying to the guards, yeah, you can come and get me. You're attaching yourself to the name, you're giving them what's called joinder in law. So Tom, it's not that he never refused to answer any of the questions, but he did say back to them, why do you want to know that information? And they have to, by law, tell him why they want that information. And even then, they cannot force him to give him the information. It's not possible to force a man or woman in law to give you any information. You cannot do it.
So Tom really had his wits about him. I mean, it takes a bit of presence of mind to be able, under pressure like that, because I know if it was me personally, I'd be so intimidated by the whole situation. I'd probably tell them everything they wanted to know just to get out of there as quickly as possible. But he really seemed to have a kind of a level head about things.
Yeah, look, don't get me wrong. I know Tom fairly well at this stage, and Tom will admit he was intimidated. He was intimidated as the same as anybody else would be. But he just had the presence of mind at that time, because perhaps of reading, perhaps because of knowing certain people, to be able to ask the right questions. Now again, he realised he had to remain extremely calm and come across as being calm and collected, because if he was being categorised as a certain type, as being a bit funny, a bit dodgy, a bit this, that or the other, then the guards may have taken a different approach, as in a more physical approach with him. So he did remain calm, and that's what he worked upon, is staying calm and just putting it into his head. Why do they want this information? The only reason he realised then, and he knows now, that they wanted the information was so that they could prosecute him for one thing or another. And the more information you give the guards, the more chance they have of prosecuting you in a court of law. You give evidence against yourself.
Right, and I have a question with regard to the charge sheet then as well. If Tom didn't answer the questions and his name wasn't on the charge sheet and there was nothing to attach him to it, how can they say that Tom was being charged with A, B, C or D?
Well, they can't.
There just seems to be a gap there.
They can't. I mean, we have copies of... I don't think anything was left out in terms of the charge sheets on the book. It's all contained in the book. But And we had no issue with doing that with Tom in the book because it didn't have his name on it.
Yeah.
They didn't even get
So it
his
could have
name.
been anyone or anything.
Well, that in itself brings up questions, you see. That then can work in his favour in the court. Well, who exactly are you charging? Because it doesn't have the name Tom on the charge sheet for if nothing else. So they can't use it really as any evidence. They cannot use that as evidence.
Again, that just shows the value of knowing what your rights are and what you can do. And just because you have somebody in a uniform telling you to do something, it doesn't mean that you have to do it.
Exactly. This goes back to the Milgram principle as well, doesn't it? You know, just because somebody puts on a blue uniform or an outfit, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't mean to say they have authority. Now, they have the authority if you give them the authority. If you say, yes, my name is Tom, or my address is such and such a place, my PPS number is this, my date of birth is that, then you're bringing yourself into their jurisdiction. You're saying, yeah, I will do what you want me to do. Now, it's not easy. It's not easy because you are under tremendous strain and pressure because you're in that situation. You're locked up. They will handcuff you when they're moving you around the place. They will lock you in a cell on your own. They will interrupt your thought patterns as you go, so on and so forth. Now, following on from that, Garda Cooper obviously was getting quite frustrated, and he put down the things that he thought Tom was saying. And Tom did not refuse to give any information, but Garda Cooper inferred on the charge sheet that this man was refusing to give him the information. He didn't actually write down, Tom, or the man did say he wanted to know why I wanted this information. He did not iterate that clearly. So Tom then, Tom's intention was to cross-examine Garda Cooper, but obviously, as we'll find out later, that didn't necessarily transpire. So just to add to that then, Tom mentioned something to me that we should raise here, and it's in the book as well, that not only did Garda Cooper not agree or I suppose arrange an interview, a formal interview that was to be recorded, which would have been good either way for the guards and for Tom, because things could have been clarified.
Well, there isn't a downside to that, presumably.
No, there isn't. But having said that, Garda Cooper didn't note that down and say, well, I've refused to give a recorded interview to the man Tom. And also with that, Tom did state to the Garda Síochána that he had evidence that would exonerate him in the car.
Okay, I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of a guard, and there's a guy sitting across from me at the table that I've arrested, and this guy is saying to me, look, the car that you have taken,
stolen,
has evidence that exonerates me, and we can all go home and go about our business, and there's no hassle for anybody here. I'd be running out to that car.
Absolutely.
To see what the information was. If
nothing else, that guard at that point in time had a duty of care in his profession as a Garda Síochána, and he had a duty of care to the man they had abducted at that stage as well, along with the other guards, to actually just check that out. Is this man... They didn't necessarily have to allow the man to go out. They could have brought the man out and checked the car out themselves and found the evidence the man was alluding to. That was all well and good. He refused to do it. He said, no, we're not going to do that. That's not the business of us today here. And he did make the reference to the term business.
Yeah, I was going to stop you there. Business. That's interesting in itself. And maybe he didn't mean anything by it. However, it does mean something in itself. Are the guards there to protect us and to serve us, or are they there for the purposes of maybe generating revenue or some other kind of commercial or business activity? I just think that's very, very interesting that that's the term used by default there by that particular guard.
Yeah, that's the turn of phrase. So obviously you don't use these turns of phrase, so to speak. In the world of music, we'll say, per se, there's certain words that people who are, we'll say, doing the sort of stuff that you are doing or I'm doing in terms of the legal stuff or whatever, there's certain phrases and words that we'd use all the time within our lexicon, as they say.
Yeah, sure.
Within our collection of words. And I don't imagine, it was kind of a shocker when I read the transcript of what Tom had written down to see the word business used. That should not be in the lexicon of the guards, the term business, because they're not in a business. They're providing a service per se, and the service of protecting the peace, guardians of the peace. They're not providing a business or services of a business, if you like. So it's kind of skewed, but it makes sense, because if their ideology is, well, we're out there to meet quotas, then that pertains to a business, doesn't it?
Well, I think so. Our targets, as the case appeared,
Targets,
it seems to be. Yeah, never a quota, always a target. that in itself opens up a can of worms, and we could probably do 10 episodes on that alone and what An Garda Síochána actually is, and the relationship that it has with the other arms of the state and why it's there and the whole lot. But we won't get into that just now because we have poor Tom to deal with.
Okay.
And he's sitting in a Garda station and he doesn't know what's going on. He has asked numerous times what is going on. Any of the little bits of information that he has been provided with, he knows he can exonerate himself by simply showing them something that's in the car, documentation or whatever it might be. They've denied him that. He is asked to put things on the record in terms of the interview. They've denied him that. So we've seen the denial of rights all over the place. So Tom's in a spot of bother, isn't he?
Oh, absolutely. And coupled with that, which we mentioned earlier anyway, was that they would not allow him to get in touch with people, his friends, his family, somebody that would actually give him some counsel on the situation, somebody that could come and talk to the guards. They wouldn't allow him access to anything outside of the Garda. And he didn't want to use their phone, as we suggested before, because he felt that if they recorded the call, it could be used in evidence against him. So he didn't want to give them anything whatsoever that potentially could be used in evidence against him.
Okay, so was there anything else then that Tom was denied or potentially denied, or did he ask for anything else?
Okay, well, the devil is in the detail. Obviously, we would like people to have a look at the detail in the book, and they'll get a full picture of all the detail there. But then, when the processing per se had finished within the Garda station, the next move was to bring him to court in Tullamore, which we'll get on to, obviously, in the next few chapters. But prior to leaving, just prior to leaving the Garda station, there was the two same guards, the arresting Garda and his associate, his friend, his colleague, came out to take him out to the squad car to bring him to Tullamore court. And he informed the guard, the arresting guard, that he had paperwork. This is the second time now a different guard had been informed that there was paperwork in the car that would help and assist him in his defence. And the Garda came out and basically said, it's too late for that now. Now, they had not left Portlaoise Garda station at this point in time. It was only a matter of going to the car and letting Tom get the paperwork that was in the car.
That sounds to me like the guard is acting as a judge or an executioner almost.
Absolutely.
Before they've ever got near a courtroom.
Yep, that's it. So, I mean, that's a key thing. So they were denying him access to a way or method for him to show the guards they didn't have to be, they didn't have to kidnap him anymore. You know?
Yeah.
But obviously they wanted to, there was the thing we alluded to earlier, we talked about off air, about the attitude test. They obviously did not like Tom's attitude. And look, different guards have different meanings for this, but in this context, the attitude seems to be, if you ask questions, you have not got a good attitude as far as the Garda are concerned, and they're going to do something to you if you ask them questions.
Reminds me a little bit of school. If you asked a question that didn't directly relate to the immediacy of the curriculum that you were being indoctrinated with, well, then you found yourself in a spot of bother. I'm not saying everybody did, but I certainly did. And that
I'm not surprised.
Okay, well, that brings us up then to the next step, which is court, which we will be dealing with, of course, in the next few episodes. But apropos of the feedback we've been getting over the last couple of weeks, and we have been asking for it, and it's been coming in thick and fast. Lots of really good questions and some interesting ones there as well. We will be getting through that, and we're going to be doing some feedback specials, which will be slightly longer episodes potentially, because we've a lot of material to plough through. Not all of it is criminal, some of it is civil as well.
And just to interject there, Lionel, we are going to answer and address all of the questions, all of the notes, all of the emails, all of the feedback we get, all of it. We're not going to avoid any of it. Some of it we may not be able to give an awful lot of detail on, depending on the information that we get, but we will attempt to answer and address all of the points and questions that we have been sent.
Perfect. So there's no need for anyone to get frustrated if it feels like we are ignoring you. We will get through all the questions pretty much in chronological order. As we have them in, we'll get through them, and there are a lot to get through. So you can look forward to some feedback specials, and of course keep your feedback coming as well, because it's all good information.
Absolutely.
Grant, we'll talk at the next episode. Thanks a million, Des.
Thanks, Lionel.
that wanted,
CLS Talks.